This millionaire was living his life peacefully until he found a baby with a bomb strapped to it inside his car. But before he could escape, something terrible happened. Comment what you think will happen and subscribe to the channel to support my work. The rain lashed against the tinted windows of the Tesla Model S as Michael Brauman left the building where he'd just wrapped up another business meeting. The clock on the dashboard read 11:47 p.m., a time when the streets of Chicago were practically deserted. His tired eyes reflected in the rearview mirror the sleepless nights dedicated to expanding his biomedical tech empire. At 42, Michael had achieved everything he'd ever dreamed of, or at least that's what he usually told himself on lonely nights in his penthouse. Business magazines celebrated him as one of the wealthiest men in the country, but no headline mentioned the price he'd paid for that success. Relationships? He didn't have time for them. Friends? Only professional contacts. Family? Well, there was Victor, his 26-year-old son, whom he barely spoke to. The sound of the rain was hypnotic, almost numbing. Michael adjusted his seat, putting the car in autonomous mode, one of the many technologies he'd invested heavily in. That's when he heard it. At first, he thought it was just his mind playing tricks, exhausted after 16 hours of meetings. But there it was again, a faint, almost imperceptible cry coming from the back seat. His heart instantly raced. It was impossible. The car was locked. The security systems were impenetrable. Still, the crying continued, now a little louder. With trembling hands, Michael turned on the car's interior light and looked back at the rear seat. What he saw made his blood run cold. There, sleeping in a kind of makeshift baby carrier, was an infant, no more than a few months old. But it wasn't just the baby's inexplicable presence that made Michael gasp for air. It was what was strapped to the tiny body, a pulsating metallic device with intertwined colored wires, and, in the center, a red digital counter reading 2942, 29 to 41, 2940. "Oh my God," Michael whispered, his hands instinctively moving to turn off the car. But nothing happened. The Tesla continued on its route as if it had a life of its own, completely ignoring his commands. The doors wouldn't respond. The windows wouldn't roll down. The navigation system showed a route he hadn't programmed. The baby began to stir, probably disturbed by the light and Michael's voice. When its eyes opened, the terror in its infantile gaze was devastating. The child began to squirm, its crying now louder and more desperate. To Michael's horror, each jerky movement of the baby caused the counter to accelerate by a few seconds. "Shh, calm down, he murmured, his voice trembling as he tried to soothe the child. But how do you calm someone when you're panicking yourself? Tears began to stream down his face as he tried, as gently as possible, to prevent the baby from moving too much. That's when he noticed the tablet attached to the passenger seat. The screen lit up on its own, revealing a message that made his stomach churn. "You destroyed my dignity and my future for money. Now you'll see what it's like to have everything snatched away in seconds." The baby continued to cry, each sob breaking Michael's heart. He noticed a small hospital identification bracelet on the child's tiny wrist. Sophia, that was the name, written there. As he tried to process what was happening, his cell phone started to ring. A video call. With hands shaking so much he could barely hold the device, Michael answered. The face that appeared on the screen made him choke. It was almost unrecognizable due to the scars, but he knew those eyes. They were the same eyes that had stared at him in despair a little over a year ago when everything fell apart. "August," Michael whispered, his voice failing. "Long time no see, Mr. Brauman," replied August Mendes, his voice carrying a tone Michael had never heard before, a mixture of pain, anger, and something deeper, more disturbing. "I see you've already met my daughter." The Tesla continued its inexorable path through the city, the rain now falling even harder. In the back seat, Sophia sobbed, her little face red from crying. The counter read 27:15. "August, for God's sake, she's just a baby," Michael pleaded, torn between looking at the phone screen and monitoring the child. "What do you want?" "What do I want?" August repeated, a humorless laugh escaping his scarred lips. "I wanted my life back. I wanted my wife not to have died of grief after I was arrested. I wanted not to have tried to kill myself when I lost custody of my daughter. But none of that is possible, is it?" Michael felt as if each word was a punch to his stomach. He knew about August's conviction for fraud, of course. He had signed the documents, given his testimony, but the consequences, no. He had no idea how much that decision had destroyed his former employee's life. The baby stirred again, a jerky movement that made the counter jump a few seconds. Michael noticed something even more alarming. Sophia's skin was beginning to show an abnormal pallor, and her breathing seemed irregular. "Something's wrong with her," Michael said, panic rising in his voice. "August, please." "Now you care?" August cut in, but there was a different note in his voice now, concern. She wasn't supposed to be reacting this quickly. The Tesla made a turn, entering an abandoned industrial area. Sophia was trembling slightly now, her little eyes losing focus. The counter read 25:03, but Michael had a terrible feeling they didn't have that much time. "Tell me what to do," Michael pleaded, tears now running freely down his face. "Please, August, she's your daughter." The silence that followed seemed to last an eternity, broken only by Sophia's increasingly weak cries and the sound of rain hitting the car roof. The Tesla continued its inexorable course through the industrial zone, its headlights cutting through the darkness as the rain relentlessly battered the vehicle. In the back seat, Sophia was now visibly trembling, her skin taking on an increasingly pale tone that made Michael's heart clench. The counter read 24:17, but the businessman was sure that the situation was much more serious than he imagined. "August," he called again, trying to keep his voice steady as he watched the child in the rearview mirror. "Something's very wrong with her. Tell me what you put on that device." The face scarred on the cell phone screen contracted into an expression that mixed concern and guilt. "It was supposed to be just a mild sedative," August replied, his voice losing some of its previous coldness. "The device has micro needles that release small doses every minute. But she shouldn't be reacting like this." Michael felt his blood run cold. With his experience in biomedical technology, he knew exactly what might be happening. "She may be having an allergic reaction," he said, noticing how Sophia's breathing became increasingly difficult. "August, for God's sake, we need to do something." It was at that moment that the tablet attached to the seat lit up again, showing a series of biometric data. The Tesla's sensor system, normally used to monitor passenger comfort, was recording the baby's vital signs. The heart rate was dangerously high, the blood oxygenation dropping rapidly. "Shit, shit, shit." August's voice sounded desperate now. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. I just wanted you to feel some of the fear I felt. The despair of not being able to do anything while everything falls apart." Michael barely heard him, his mind working frantically as he analyzed the data on the tablet. Years developing neural prostheses and biomedical systems had prepared him to recognize signs of anaphylactic shock, and that was exactly what the numbers indicated. "Listen to me," he said, interrupting August's anguished monologue. "Your daughter is going into anaphylactic shock. If we don't do something now, she may—" His voice failed, unable to complete the sentence. The silence that followed was deafening. On the cell phone screen, August's face had lost all color. "No," he whispered. No, this can't be happening." Sophia let out a faint whimper, her lips beginning to take on a bluish color. The counter read 22:45, but Michael knew they didn't have even half that time. August, tell me how to disable this, now. I can't, August replied, his voice breaking. If I deactivate it before the time, all the evidence will be sent automatically to the authorities. The evidence about your son, about how he... What evidence? What are you talking about? Michael cut in, his attention divided between the vital signs monitor and Sophia's increasingly pale little face. Your son, Victor, August said, the words coming out as if causing physical pain. He's the one who forged the evidence against me. He's been embezzling money from the companies for years, using my name, my position. When I found out, he framed me. I have all the evidence, all the documents. If I disable the device now, everything goes to the police. Michael's world seemed to spin for a moment. Victor, his own son. August's words explained so many things, the inexplicable expenses, the erratic behavior, the nights he didn't come home. But now was not the time for that. In the back seat, Sophia barely moved. I don't care, Michael said, his voice firm for the first time since it all began. Send all the evidence, do what you want, but save your daughter. August began typing frantically on some keyboard out of the camera's view. The deactivation code, he said quickly. It's the last 4 digits of the serial number of the neural prosthesis you developed last year. The one that saved that child with paralysis. You need to type it into the device's panel. Michael felt his heart skip a beat. That specific project, he remembered. August crying with emotion when they saw the child move for the first time. It was the kind of moment that used to give meaning to his work before everything turned into numbers and profits. Carefully, he twisted to reach the device on Sophia's body. The digital display flashed menacingly, 2013. His hands trembled, so much that he missed the first attempt to type the numbers. On the second try, he succeeded, 8472. A soft click, and the device shut down. The microneedles retracted automatically, leaving only small red marks on the baby's delicate skin. But Sophia was still not well. Her breathing was still difficult, her little body trembling. She needs medical attention, Michael said, turning, his attention to the tablet with vital signs. August, let me take her to a hospital. Before August could answer, a red warning light began to flash on the Tesla's dashboard. The car swerved abruptly, causing Michael to instinctively grip the steering wheel. On the onboard computer screen, a message appeared. Remote access attempt detected. What's happening? August asked, his voice tense. Michael felt his blood run cold as he recognized the invasion pattern. It was a specific code developed by his own company, a code that only a few people had access to. It's Victor, he said, the realization hitting him like a punch. He must have found out. The company's security protocols must have alerted to the car. The Tesla made another violent turn, throwing Michael against the door. In the back seat, Sophia let out a faint whimper. Through the video call, August's face was contorted with panic. He's going to try to cause an accident, Michael said, his hands flying over the control panel. The system allows total remote control in case of emergency, but maybe I can... His words were interrupted by another jolt from the car. Through the windshield, Michael saw a pole approaching rapidly. His fingers worked frantically on the panel, trying to regain some control. The emergency system responded partially, but it wasn't enough. The impact, when it came, was deafening. The world spun in slow motion as the Tesla skidded on the wet pavement. Michael's last conscious thought was to throw himself over the back seat, using his own body to protect Sophia from the collision. The silence that followed the impact was almost as deafening as the collision. Michael struggled to maintain consciousness, his aching body protecting Sophia, who miraculously was still breathing, albeit with difficulty. The smell of twisted metal and burnt rubber filled the air, mixing with the rain that was now entering through the cracked windshield. With effort, Michael tried to move. Every muscle in his body protested, but the concern for Sophia was greater than any physical pain. The baby was pale, her breathing even more irregular after the impact. The cell phone had been thrown during the collision, the call with August interrupted. The tablet, however, was still working, showing the child's increasingly worrying vital signs. "Hold on tight, little one," Michael murmured, his hands trembling as he tried to assess Sophia's condition. "I'm going to get you out of here." The Tesla was pinned against the pole, the driver's side completely destroyed. The passenger door, however, seemed less damaged. Carefully, Michael began to crawl towards it, holding Sophia close to his chest. Every movement was agony, but he couldn't stop. Not now. That's when he heard the sound of another car approaching. His tense muscles froze as he recognized the characteristic rumble of the engine. It was Victor's Porsche. The vehicle stopped abruptly near the destroyed Tesla, and Michael heard the door slam. "Dad?" Victor's voice sounded strange, unrecognizable. "Dad, are you there?" Michael finally managed to open the passenger door, practically falling out of the car with Sophia in his arms. The rain continued to fall, now weaker, creating a fog that gave an unreal aspect to the scene. Through it, he saw his son. Victor was unrecognizable. His eyes were bloodshot, his pupils too dilated even in the dim light. His movements were erratic, his hands shaking as he held something that made Michael's heart stop. A gun. "What have you done?" Victor asked, his voice wavering between rage and despair. "Why did you have to interfere? It was supposed to be quick, clean. The car was going to end up in the river. No one would find out." "Victor." Michael tried to keep his voice calm, even though his heart was racing. "Son, this baby needs medical help. She's having a severe allergic reaction." "No!" Victor shouted, waving the gun dangerously. "Don't talk to me like I'm a child. You never cared, you never had time. Always the companies, always the projects, always him." The last word came out like a snarl, and Michael realized that his son was looking at something beyond him. Turning slightly, still protecting Sophia, he saw August emerging from the shadows. His former employee must have tracked the GPS of the device he had placed on Sophia. "Put the gun down, Victor," August said, his voice surprisingly controlled. "Enough destruction." "Destruction?" Victor laughed, a hysterical sound that made Michael shudder. "You don't know anything. You know why I ruined your life? Why I falsified that evidence?" Sophia moaned softly in Michael's arms, who could feel the abnormal heat emanating from the small body. She urgently needed medical attention, but any sudden movement now could be fatal. "I saw how he looked at you," Victor continued, tears beginning to stream down his contorted face. "How he talked about you in meetings. August is brilliant. August is dedicated. You were more of a son to him than I was." The revelation hit Michael like a punch in the gut. All the times he had praised August, all the times he had shown pride in his achievements. Had he done it at the expense of his own son? "So I started embezzling the money." Victor was practically sobbing now, the gun trembling in his hand. "At first it was just a little to get attention, but then I met people. They showed me how to forget, how not to feel. The drugs." "Son." Michael took a step forward, his heart breaking at the sight of Victor's state. "Why didn't you ever talk to me?" "Talk?" Victor laughed again, that terrible sound. "When? At the shareholders' meetings? At the dinners you always cancelled? On my birthdays that you forgot?" The rain had practically stopped now, leaving only a heavy silence in the air. Sophia was getting hotter and hotter in Michael's arms, her breathing more difficult. In the distance, finally, he could hear sirens approaching. "The Tesla's emergency protocols," August explained, taking a small step forward. They automatically alert the authorities in case of an accident, and all the evidence I had. The system was programmed to send everything if something went wrong. It doesn't matter, Victor said, his voice taking on a frighteningly calm tone. Nothing matters anymore. I didn't want that child to get hurt, but now it's too late. For all of us. He raised the gun, pointing it directly at Michael and Sophia. His hands trembled violently, his glazed eyes betraying his altered state. August started to move, trying to put himself between them. "Don't come closer!" Victor shouted, turning the gun towards August. You stole my father, stole everything." It was at that moment that Sophia had a seizure in Michael's arms. Her little body began to tremble violently, her lips now completely blue. The sudden movement startled Victor, who pulled the trigger reflexively. The sound of the shot seemed to freeze time. August dove to the side, the bullet grazing his shoulder. Victor, horrified at what he had just done, dropped the gun. The sirens were very close now, red and blue lights beginning to illuminate the chaotic scene. "Oh my God," Victor whispered, looking at his own hands as if he didn't recognize them. "What have I done? Dad, help me!" But Michael barely heard him. Sophia was going into respiratory arrest in his arms. The tablet, still working, showed her vital signs collapsing. The police cars began to surround the scene, but all that mattered at that moment was the baby struggling to breathe. "Help!" Michael shouted, his voice hoarse with despair. "She needs a doctor, now!" The next moments were a blur of movement and chaos. Police officers surrounding Victor, who offered no resistance, falling to his knees on the wet ground. Paramedics running with a stretcher. August, holding his wounded shoulder, begging to accompany his daughter in the ambulance. As the medics fought to stabilize Sophia, Michael watched the scene as if he were outside his own body, his son being handcuffed and placed in a police car. His former employee, the man who had tried to take revenge on him, now crying with worry for his daughter, and himself covered in blood and rain, realizing that all his tech empire and money meant nothing in the face of the fragility of an innocent life. The hospital corridors had that heavy silence typical of the early hours of the morning, broken only by the sound of medical equipment and hurried footsteps of the staff on duty. In the waiting room of the pediatric ICU, Michael remained seated in the same position for hours, still wearing the blood-stained clothes from the collision. His body ached where the doctors had bandaged him, but he barely felt the physical pain. His mind was fixed on little Sophia, fighting for her life a few rooms away. On the other side of the room, August paced back and forth, his shoulder bandaged where the bullet had grazed. From time to time, he stopped in front of the glass door that gave access to the ICU, as if he could see through the walls to the bed where his daughter was. The silence between the two men was thick, charged with guilt and regret. "The doctors said the next 24 hours are crucial," August said finally, his voice hoarse from crying. "The sedative I used, she had a severe allergic reaction. Her little body is too small, too fragile." He couldn't finish the sentence, dropping into a chair with his face in his hands. Michael watched the man who just hours before had planned his revenge, now completely destroyed by the possibility of losing his daughter. "You didn't know," Michael said softly. "There was no way to know she would react like that." "Don't defend me." August raised his head sharply, his red eyes flashing with anger and guilt. "I put my own daughter in danger. I used her as a weapon. What kind of father does that?" The question hung in the air, heavy and painful. What kind of father? Michael thought of Victor, now detained in some cell, probably in withdrawal. His own son, whom he had lost without even realizing. A nurse entered the room, making both men stand up instantly. "Gentlemen," she began, consulting a clipboard, "the baby is stabilized for now, but still in critical condition. Dr. Martinez wants to speak with you." They followed the nurse down a corridor to a small meeting room. The doctor was already waiting for them, his tired face revealing the intensity of the last few hours. "The situation is delicate," he began, getting straight to the point. The sedative caused a severe anaphylactic reaction, which in turn led to neurological complications. We are doing everything possible, but we need to be realistic about the possible sequelae. What kind of sequelae? August asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. It's too early to be sure, but preliminary tests indicate possible damage. To the central nervous system. She may have motor difficulties, developmental delays, coordination problems. Each word seemed like a stab in August's chest. Michael, however, felt something different, a spark of hope. "Doctor," he interrupted, leaning forward, "my company develops biomedical technology, especially in the neural field. If there is any neurological damage, maybe we can—" "No!" August stood up abruptly, knocking over the chair. "You're not going to use my daughter as a guinea pig for your experiments. Haven't you destroyed enough?" "August, listen." Michael kept his voice calm, even though his heart was pounding. "We have the most advanced technology in the country in this area. If there is a chance to help Sophia—" "A chance?" August laughed bitterly. "Like the chance you gave me when your son accused me? Like the chance my wife had to defend herself before she died of grief?" Dr. Martinez cleared his throat, drawing the attention of the two. "Gentlemen, I understand that there is a complicated history here, but now is not the time for that. Our priority is the recovery of little Sophia. Any decisions about future treatments can wait." At that moment, a commotion in the hallway caught their attention. Raised voices, hurried footsteps. The door to the room opened, and a social worker entered, followed by 2 police officers. "Good evening," she said, her professional tone barely disguising the discomfort of the situation. "I'm Maria Luisa, from Child Protective Services. We are here to discuss the situation of the minor Sofia Mendes." August paled. What does this mean?" "Mr. Mendes," she began, consulting a file. "Due to the circumstances of tonight's incident and your background, we need to assess the child's custody situation." "No!" August took a step forward, but the police officers moved subtly. "No, you can't take her away from me. Not again." "Mr. Mendes," the social worker kept her tone calm but firm. "You put your daughter's life at risk. You used an unauthorized device to administer controlled substances to a 5-month-old child. I understand there are extenuating circumstances, but our priority is the child's well-being." Michael watched the scene with a lump in his throat. The devastation on August's face was unbearable to watch. "Please," August pleaded, his voice broken. "She's all I have left. I make mistakes, yes, I've made a lot of mistakes, but I love my daughter. Please." "At this moment," continued the social worker, "Sophia will be under temporary state custody as soon as she is discharged. A hearing will be scheduled to determine—" "Wait," Michael stood up, surprising everyone. What if I take responsibility for her?" The silence that followed was deafening. August stared at him as if he had gone mad. The social worker frowned, consulting her papers. "Mr. Brauman," she said finally, "you have no legal connection to the child. Furthermore, according to what is written here, you were also involved in the events of tonight." "I have resources," Michael insisted. "I can guarantee the best medical treatment, the best possible recovery. And as for August, he can visit, follow everything, under supervision, of course." "Is this some kind of joke?" August practically spat the words. "First you destroy my life, and now you want to take my daughter too?" "No." Michael turned to him, his words loaded with contained emotion. "I want to fix what I helped to destroy. I can't bring your wife back. I can't erase what happened. But I can try to ensure that Sophia has the best possible chance of recovery." Before anyone could respond, an alarm sounded in the ICU. Dr. Martinez ran out of the room, followed by the nurse. For a few tense seconds, no one moved. Then the doctor returned, his face grave. "Sophia is having another crisis," he said. "We need to act fast. Who is her legal guardian at this moment? The social worker and August exchanged glances. The battle for Sophia's life was just beginning, and the decisions they made in the next few minutes could change everything. The constant beep of the heart monitors echoed through the ICU as the medical team worked frantically around the small bed where Sophia fought for her life. Through the glass of the observation area, August watched helplessly, his hands pressed against the glass as if he could reach through it and reach his daughter. Beside him, Michael remained silent, his presence a constant reminder of how they had arrived there. "She's having seizures," explained Dr. Martinez, approaching the two men. "The neurological damage is worsening faster than we anticipated. We need a decision now on the treatment protocol." The social worker, who had remained discreetly in the back of the room, stepped forward. "At this moment, considering the emergency of the situation, and until the issue of custody is resolved, the state temporarily assumes legal responsibility for the minor." "No!" August turned sharply. "She's my daughter! You can't—" "Mr. Mendez," interrupted the social worker, her voice firm but not without compassion. "You are emotionally compromised and, considering the events of tonight, you are not in a position to make medical decisions at this time." Michael watched the scene with a heavy heart. Inside the ICU, Sophia looked even smaller and more fragile, connected to so many tubes and machines. Her little face, once rosy and full of life, was pale and contorted in an expression of pain that no baby should experience. "Dr. Martinez," called Michael, his voice taking on the decisive tone he usually used in important meetings. "My company has developed a new type of neural interface, still in the experimental phase, but with promising results in cases of acute neurological damage." The doctor frowned, interested. "The adaptive microprosthesis project? I read some preliminary articles, but it hasn't been approved for use in patients this young yet." "There are risks," Michael admitted, "but at this moment, what are her chances without radical intervention?" The doctor's silence was more eloquent than any answer. August, who had listened to the conversation, took a step in Michael's direction, his eyes shining with restrained tears. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Why do you care so much?" Michael closed his eyes for a moment, the memories of the last few hours weighing on his shoulders. "Because I saw my own son get lost without me realizing it. Because I spent years building technology to save lives while destroying others without even noticing. Because—" his voice failed. "Because maybe this is the only chance I have to do something really right." The social worker cleared her throat, drawing everyone's attention. "Even if we approve this experimental treatment, we need to consider the costs, the logistics." "I'll take care of everything," Michael cut in. "Costs, legal responsibility, whatever is needed, but we need to act now." Inside the ICU, the monitors began to emit a sharper sound. Sophia's heart rate was becoming erratic. "Dr. Martinez," the voice of social worker betrayed her own tension. "As the temporary legal representative of the minor, I need your professional opinion. Is this experimental treatment the best option?" The doctor ran a hand over his tired face, observing Sophia's vital data. "Conventionally, I'd say it's too risky, but at this point, it may be the only real chance she has." The decision was made in a matter of minutes. While the medical team prepared Sophia for the procedure, Michael made dozens of calls, mobilizing his research team in the middle of the night. In less than an hour, the first prototype of the infant neural interface was on its way to the hospital, along with the company's best specialists. August watched everything with a mixture of hope and fear. At one point, he gripped Michael's arm hard, enough to hurt. "If something goes wrong," he said, his voice low and intense, "if my daughter, I swear—" "I know," Michael replied simply. "I know." The following hours were a torment of waiting and uncertainty. The surgery to implant the neural interface was delicate under any circumstances. In a 5-month-old baby, it was an unprecedented challenge. Each minute seemed to drag on as the two men waited for news, each lost in their own thoughts and regrets. It was during this wait that a police officer approached Michael discreetly. "Mr. Brauman," he said in a low voice, "about your son. He's exhibiting severe withdrawal symptoms. The doctor at the precinct recommended immediate hospitalization." Michael felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. Victor, his son, was suffering alone in a cell while he was trying to save another man's daughter. The irony of the situation did not escape him. "Is there any clinic that can—" "I've already assessed some options," the officer interrupted. "There's a private clinic specializing in chemical dependency that accepts court cases. But the cost—" "Do what's necessary," Michael said, running his hands over his exhausted face. "Just take care of him." The officer nodded and walked away. August, who had listened to the conversation, looked at Michael with an expression impossible to decipher. "Your son needs you," he said finally. "Sophia needs me too," Michael replied. "And unlike Victor, she's innocent in all of this." Before August could respond, Dr. Martinez appeared in the hallway. His face was marked by the fatigue of hours of surgery, but there was something in his eyes, a glimmer of hope. "The interface has been successfully implanted," he said. "The first signs are promising, but the next 48 hours will be critical. We need to closely monitor how her nervous system will react to the technology." "Can I see her?" August asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. The doctor hesitated, looking at the social worker who was still with them. She made a small gesture of assent. "Briefly," the doctor agreed, "but only through the glass for now. She is in isolation to prevent infections." While August followed the doctor, Michael remained behind, feeling the weight of all the decisions and consequences that had brought them to that point. His phone vibrated, another message from the clinic where Victor was being admitted, asking for authorization to start treatment. The social worker, who had observed the entire scene, approached him. "You understand," she began carefully, "that if you take legal responsibility for Sophia, you will have to demonstrate the ability to care for her adequately, especially considering the situation with your own son." Michael stared at her, feeling the weariness of days in her words. "I know it sounds crazy, but maybe by taking care of her, I'll learn to be the father I should have been to Victor." At the end of the hallway, through the glass of the ICU, August rested his forehead against the cold surface, whispering words of love to his unconscious, a daughter. The sun was beginning to rise, painting the sky in soft tones that contrasted cruelly with the dramatic nature of the situation. It was the beginning of a new day, but for everyone involved, nothing would be the same. The days that followed in the hospital were a confusing mix of small victories and devastating defeats. Sophia was reacting to the experimental treatment, but each progress was accompanied by unexpected complications. The neural interface was working, helping to control the seizures and stabilize her basic brain functions, but the baby's tiny body struggled to adapt to the invasive technology. Michael practically moved into the hospital, turning a small meeting room near the ICU into his makeshift office. From there, he coordinated both the constant monitoring of Sophia and the urgent matters of his companies, which now seemed strangely distant and unimportant. His deep, dark circles under his eyes and unshaven beard betrayed the sleepless nights. August also didn't leave the hospital, except when obliged by the social worker, who insisted that he needed to rest properly if he wanted to have any chance of regaining custody of his daughter. In the moments when they met, he and Michael maintained a silent truce, united by concern for Sophia. "The latest tests show an improvement in brain activity," explained Dr. Laura, a pediatric neurologist who had joined the team. She pointed to a series of colored images on the computer screen. The interface is managing to redirect the nerve impulses correctly, avoiding the damaged areas. But, Michael asked, detecting the hesitation in the doctor's voice, but the process is being slower than we expected, she sighed, moving to another image. The damage caused by the anaphylactic shock was extensive. Even with the technology working perfectly, Sophia will probably have permanent sequelae. August, who was leaning against the wall on the other side of the room, closed his eyes tightly. Each confirmation of the damage he had caused to his own daughter was like a stab in his chest. "What kind of sequelae?" Michael asked, keeping his voice steady. "It's difficult to predict for sure at this age," replied Dr. Laura. "But we should expect delays in motor development, possible coordination difficulties, perhaps even speech problems. When she reaches that age, the neural interface can help minimize these problems, but she will need special care for the rest of her life," completed August, his voice laden with guilt. The doctor nodded gently. "Family support will be crucial for her recovery and development. She will need constant therapy, regular medical follow-up, possible adjustments to the neural interface as she grows." "Money!" August interrupted bitterly. "That's what she needs. Money that I don't have after you destroyed my life." Michael felt the weight of those words, but before he could respond, his phone vibrated. It was the clinic where Victor was admitted. His son had tried to escape during the night, assaulting a nurse in the process. He was sedated now, but the doctors recommended transfer to a more secure unit. "Excuse me," he murmured, leaving the room to answer the call. In the hallway, he leaned against the cold wall, feeling the weight of all the responsibilities he had assumed. How could he take care of Sophia while his own son was falling apart? "It's not easy, is it?" The voice of Maria Luisa, the social worker, surprised him. She was standing a few feet away, watching him with an expression that mixed understanding and concern, trying to fix broken lives. "I broke these lives," Michael replied, running a hand over his tired face. "Now I need to try to fix them, even if I don't know how." "The custody hearing will be next week," she said, approaching. "The judge will want to see that there is a concrete plan for Sophia's care, a stable family structure, adequate emotional support." "And how can I offer that?" Michael asked, more to himself than to her. "My own son is hospitalized, fighting the addiction he developed because I was never there. What right do I have to offer to take care of another man's daughter?" Maria Luisa was silent for a moment, as if carefully weighing her next words. "Maybe," she began softly, "it is precisely because you recognize your mistakes that you are the best option for Sophia now." Before Michael could respond, an alarm sounded in the ICU. The sharp, insistent sound made his heart race. It was the same alarm they had heard on the first night, when Sophia almost died. Doctors and nurses ran to the baby's room, while August shouted, trying to enter as well. "The interface is failing," someone shouted. "The vital signs are unstable." Michael ran to the room, pushing people in his way. Through the isolation glass, he could see Sophia's tiny body convulsing, the monitors showing alarming data. "What's happening?" he asked Dr. Martinez, who had just arrived. "Her immune system is rejecting the interface," replied the doctor, already putting on the protective equipment to enter the room. "We need to stabilize her before the damage is irreversible." "No!" August tried to get past the security guards, who were holding him back. "My daughter, let me in." The next scene seemed to happen in slow motion, the medical team working frantically around Sophia's bed. August being restrained, tears running down his scarred face. Maria Luisa on the phone, probably contacting the judge to report the emergency, and Michael standing between them all, feeling more helpless than ever. All his money, all his power, all his technology, none of it seemed enough at that moment. His phone vibrated again in his pocket. More news about Victor, probably. But he couldn't move, his eyes fixed on little Sophia fighting for her life. It was then that something unexpected happened. Amidst the chaos, the baby opened her eyes. They were frighteningly conscious eyes for someone so small, and they were fixed directly on him. For a moment that seemed to last an eternity, Michael felt as if that look pierced through all the layers of guilt, regret and pain he had built up over the years. "Doctor," called a nurse, "the signs are stabilizing." Indeed, the monitors were beginning to show a gradual improvement. The neural interface was working normally again, as if Sophia's immune system had suddenly decided to accept it. "This is extraordinary," murmured Dr. Martinez, checking the data. "I've never seen such a rapid recovery in a rejection case." August had stopped fighting the security guards, his body trembling with contained sobs. Michael approached him slowly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "She's strong," he said simply, "stronger than all of us." At that moment, something changed subtly between the two men. It wasn't forgiveness, there were still too many wounds for that. It wasn't friendship, the past still weighed too heavily. It was something more basic, more primitive, the mutual recognition that, regardless of their differences, both were completely committed to the survival of that small life that somehow had become the center of their shattered worlds. The day of the custody hearing dawned gray and cold, as if the very climate reflected the tension that hung over everyone. Michael adjusted his tie in front of the bathroom mirror at the hospital where he had spent another night. His clothes, although expensive and well-tailored, couldn't disguise the weariness on his face. Beside him, on the sink, his phone showed 3 missed calls from the rehab clinic. Victor had had another crisis the night before. The doctor said that the withdrawal was being particularly severe, his body reacting violently to the lack of drugs. He alternated between moments of painful lucidity when he begged to see his father and episodes of uncontrolled rage during which he had to be restrained. "Mr. Brauman?" The voice of Maria Luisa brought him back to the present. The social worker was standing in the bathroom door, her professional expression barely disguising her concern. "It's almost time. The judge doesn't like delays." Michael nodded, taking one last look in the mirror. Outside, in the hallway of the ICU, August was also preparing for the hearing. Someone, probably Michael's legal team, had provided a suit for him, but the clothes seemed uncomfortable on his tense body. "Remember," Michael's lawyer was saying to August, "the judge needs to see that you are committed to your daughter's recovery. That you understand the seriousness of what happened, but that you are willing to change." "I don't need to pretend anything," August cut in, his voice low but intense. "Every second of the last few days has been a torture, seeing my daughter suffer because of what I did. I don't need a lawyer to tell me how to feel guilty." Before the situation could escalate, Dr. Laura appeared with Sophia's latest tests. "The neural interface is working perfectly now," she explained, showing the graphs. "After that episode of rejection, it's like her body has finally accepted the technology. The vital signs are stable, and we have already noticed some positive neurological reflexes. But she will still need special care," added Dr. Martinez, who had joined the group. "The recovery will be long, and the sequelae—" "What kind of sequelae exactly?" interrupted a new voice. It was Dr. Paul Mendez, the expert appointed by the judge to evaluate the case. He had arrived silently and was now observing the exams with professional interest. "The neurological damage was extensive," explained Dr. Laura. "Even with the interface working perfectly, Sophia will probably have motor difficulties, possible developmental delays. She will need constant physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy." "And how much does all this cost?" asked the expert, his eyes turning to August. The silence that followed was heavy. Everyone knew that August, after losing his job and going through the judicial system, did not have the financial means to provide the necessary treatment for his daughter. "I'll pay for everything," Michael said, stepping forward, "regardless of who gets custody." Dr. Paul made a note on his clipboard. "Mr. Brauman, I understand your generosity, but the judge will want to know why a man whose own son is hospitalized for chemical dependency thinks he is in a position to take care of a child with special needs." The question hit Michael like a punch to the gut. His phone chose that exact moment to vibrate again, another call from the rehab clinic. He ignored it, keeping his eyes fixed on the expert. "Doctor," he began, choosing his words carefully, "I failed my son. I spent years building an empire while Victor got lost. I didn't see the signs, didn't give him the attention he needed. And now," his voice faltered for a moment, "now he's paying the price for my mistakes. But maybe precisely because I failed. So completely as a father, I understand better than anyone the importance of doing the right thing this time." The right thing? August couldn't contain the bitterness in his voice. How can it be the right thing to take a daughter away from the father who loves her? "No one is talking about taking your daughter, Mr. Mendez," Maria Luisa intervened gently. "But the judge needs to consider what's best for Sofia at this moment. And that includes not just love, but also practical conditions to provide the care she needs." Before anyone could answer, a sharp cry came from the pediatric ICU. It was Sofia, waking from her morning sleep. Immediately, August moved towards the room, but was gently stopped by a nurse. "Not yet, Mr. Mendez. She needs to be fed and medicated first." Seeing his own father prevented from taking care of his daughter seemed physically painful for August. He recoiled, leaning against the wall with his fists clenched. "Gentlemen," Maria Luisa called, consulting her watch. "It's time. The car is waiting to take us to the courthouse." The group began to move towards the elevator, but Michael hesitated, looking back. Through the glass of the pediatric ICU, he could see Sofia now awake, her curious little eyes watching the movements of the nurse taking care of her. The neural interface, a delicate network of sensors almost invisible under her skin, glowed softly under the fluorescent light. "She is strong," said Dr. Laura, who had stayed behind with him. "Stronger than we imagined. Whatever the judge's decision today, I'm sure she will overcome all of this." Michael nodded silently, but couldn't shake the feeling that somehow the fate of all of them was connected to that little child who, against all odds, continued fighting. In the elevator, the silence was deafening. Michael and August avoided looking at each other, each lost in their own fears and regrets. Michael's phone vibrated once more. Now it was a text message from the clinic. "Urgent, Victor asks to see you. Very unstable emotional state." Michael closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of all his decisions. How could he be going to fight for the custody of another man's daughter while his own son suffered alone? But then he remembered Sofia's gaze, that inexplicable connection he had felt when she looked at him during the crisis. The elevator reached the ground floor, its doors opening to reveal a small crowd of reporters. Somehow, the story had leaked. The wealthy biomedical technology entrepreneur fighting for custody of the daughter of a former employee who had tried to take revenge on him. "Mr. Brauman, is it true that your son is hospitalized for an overdose? Mr. Mendez, how do you feel knowing that the man who destroyed your life wants to take your daughter? Will the baby have permanent sequelae?" The questions came from all sides, camera flashes firing incessantly. Michael instinctively placed himself in front of August, protecting him from the reporters, while the hospital security guards cleared a path to the car that awaited them. Already inside the vehicle, August looked at Michael with an indescribable expression. "Why?" he asked simply. "Why are you protecting me after everything?" Michael remained silent for a long moment, watching the city pass by the window. Finally, he replied, "Because maybe by protecting you, I will learn to better protect my own son as well." The courthouse was strangely silent that morning, the empty corridors echoing only the footsteps of the group heading towards the courtroom. Michael walked a few steps behind August, observing the tense posture of the man who, under other circumstances, should be his enemy. The borrowed suit looked even more uncomfortable now, the scars on his face more evident under the cold light of the hallway. Before entering the room, Maria Luisa stopped them for final instructions. "Remember," she said in a low voice, "the judge will assess not only the material conditions, but also the emotional environment that each of you can offer to Sophia. It is important to remain calm, regardless of what is said in there." At that moment, Michael's phone vibrated once more. It wasn't the clinic. This time it was his secretary. "Mr. Brauman, the board is demanding an emergency meeting. The company's shares have fallen 15% since the story leaked to the press." He turned off the phone without answering. The empire he had built with such care was crumbling, but somehow that seemed insignificant compared to what was about to happen in that room. The hearing began promptly at 9 a.m. Judge Ricardo Almeida, a middle-aged man with sharp eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses, studied the documents in front of him intently. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the sound of the air conditioning and the occasional turning of pages. "Well," he began finally, "this is a case peculiar, to say the least." His eyes moved from August to Michael, assessing them. "We have a father who put his own daughter at risk of life in an attempt at revenge, and an entrepreneur whose negligence with his own son led him to chemical dependency, now offering to take care of the child. Frankly, gentlemen, I don't know which of the two scenarios worries me more." August lowered his head, his hands trembling visibly on the table. Michael kept his gaze steady, although each word of the judge was like a stab in his chest. "Your Honor," began Michael's lawyer, "my client is prepared to offer all the necessary guarantees for the well-being of the minor. We have a detailed plan of medical care, including—" Yes, interrupted the judge. "I read the report. Impressive, I must say. Experimental neural interface, dedicated medical team, specialized therapies, everything money can buy." He leaned forward, his eyes fixed on Michael. "But money is not everything, Mr. Brauman. How can I trust the care of a vulnerable child to someone who has failed so completely with his own son?" Before Michael could respond, the door of the room opened abruptly. It was a bailiff carrying an urgent envelope. The judge opened it immediately, his expression changing subtly as he read its contents. "It seems your son attempted suicide at the clinic an hour ago, Mr. Brauman," he said, his voice softer now. "He is stable, but, well, that certainly adds a new layer of complexity to our case." Michael felt the world spin. Victor, his son, had tried. He needed to go there, needed to see his son, but he couldn't abandon the hearing. Not now. "Your Honor," August's voice surprised everyone. It was the first time he had spoken since the beginning of the hearing. "May I say something?" The judge gestured affirmatively, curious. "I hate this man," began August, pointing to Michael. "I hate what he represents. I hate how his negligence destroyed not only his own son's life, but mine too. Because of him, I lost my job, my reputation, my wife." His voice faltered for a moment. "But in the last few days, I've seen something I didn't expect. I saw him spend sleepless nights monitoring my daughter. I saw him risk his own company to develop a technology that could save her. I saw him—" August stopped, taking a deep breath. Before continuing, "I saw him do for Sophia what he didn't do for his own son. And maybe that's exactly why he deserves a chance, because he finally understood the price of his failures." The silence that followed was so dense that it could be cut with a knife. The judge watched August intensely, as if trying to read something beyond his words. What exactly are you suggesting, Mr. Mendez? I'm suggesting, August seemed to struggle with each word, that maybe the best solution is not to choose between the two of us. Maybe Sophia needs both of us. Maria Luisa shifted in her chair, her eyes shining with something that seemed like approval. The judge removed his glasses, cleaning them methodically while considering August's words. "Mr. Brauman," he called finally, "your son needs you now. How can you commit to the care of another child at this time?" Michael felt all the masks he had built over the years crumbling. "Your Honor," his voice was hoarse, "I've spent my entire life building things, companies, technologies, fortunes, but in the process, I destroyed what was most important. I didn't see my son get lost. I didn't see the despair of a loyal employee. I didn't see—" He swallowed hard. "I didn't see that some things, once broken, can't simply be replaced with new ones." "And Sophia?" asked the judge. "How does she fit into this redemption story?" "She's not a redemption story," Michael replied, surprising everyone with the firmness in his voice. "She's an innocent child who needs all the help possible to overcome what we did to her. I can't undo the past. I can't fix all the lives I helped break, but I can. We can." He looked at August. "Try to do the right thing now." The judge put his glasses back on, observing the two men for a long moment. In the silence of the room, the ticking of the clock seemed deafening. "I must remind you, gentlemen," he said finally, "that this is not a decision about you. It's about what's best for Sophia. And frankly, looking at this situation from the outside, everything looks like a disaster waiting to happen." He paused, consulting again the documents in front of him. "However," he continued, "I also see something unusual here. I see two men who, despite all the history of hurt and revenge, seem to have found a common ground: the well-being of this child." The judge leaned back in his chair, his decision seemingly made. "Before I make my final decision, I want to visit Sophia at the hospital, see for myself how she is reacting to the treatment, what your dynamics with her are like. And—" he looked directly at Michael. "I suggest that you go see your son now. He needs his father more than ever." The hearing was adjourned, but the judge's words hung in the air like a heavy cloud. As they left the room, Michael and August found themselves side by side again, united in their shared concern for Sophia, but now also linked by something deeper: the mutual recognition of their failures as fathers and the painful awareness that the path to redemption would be much more complex than either of them had imagined. The hallway of the rehab clinic was very different from the hospital where Sophia was interned. The pastel-toned walls tried to create a welcoming atmosphere, but there was something deeply disturbing about the forced silence and the locked doors. Michael followed the head nurse, each step echoing heavily on the vinyl floor. "He is sedated now," she explained in a low voice. "We found him in time, but it was close. The cuts were not deep enough to cause permanent damage, but the intention was clear." Michael just nodded, unable to form words. His son had tried to take his own life, and he was too busy fighting for the custody of another child to notice the signs. The door to Victor's room was ajar. Through the crack, Michael could see his son sleeping, the bandaged wrists contrasting painfully with the paleness of his skin. He looked so young like that, so vulnerable. Not the embittered man who had threatened everyone with a gun, but the boy who used to wait for his father to come home from work until eventually he stopped waiting. "He left a letter," said the nurse, handing over a crumpled envelope. "He asked you to read it when, well, if something happened." With trembling hands, Michael opened the envelope. Victor's handwriting was irregular, the words piling up as if they had been written in a hurry or despair. "Dad, remember when I was 10 years old and you promised me we'd go camping? I waited the whole weekend with my backpack ready, but you had an emergency meeting. There was always an emergency meeting, a company to save, a technology to develop. a life to change. All lives except mine. I'm not writing this to make you feel guilty. God knows you already carry enough guilt. I can see it in your eyes every time you visit me here. I'm writing because I finally understood something. You've always been a man obsessed with fixing broken things. And at some point, unconsciously, I decided to break myself too. Maybe that way you'd finally try to fix me, but it doesn't work like that, does it? Some things, once broken, can't be fixed. Not completely, like that man August. Like your daughter now, like me. I saw in the newspapers what's happening, the custody battle for the girl. Funny how you're willing to fight so hard for her when you never fought for me. But maybe that's exactly why. Maybe you finally understood what it means to lose someone you should have protected. Don't get me wrong, I don't want that child to suffer. What I did that night, it wasn't her I wanted to hurt. It was you. It was myself. It was this whole sick system we built, where success and money matter more than people. If you're reading this, it probably means I finally made it. Or maybe not. Maybe someone found me in time, as always happens in these expensive clinics you pay for. Anyway, I want you to know one thing. I don't hate you, Dad. I wanted to hate you. It would be easier. But the truth is that I'm still that 10-year-old boy sitting on the porch with a camping backpack, waiting for you to arrive. Take care of her better than you took care of me, Victor. Michael dropped the letter, his legs failing. The nurse quickly brought a chair, helping him to sit down. Dad? Victor's weak voice made him lift his head. His son was awake now, his eyes clouded by the sedatives, but focused on him. I'm here, said Michael, approaching the bed. I'm here, son. Did you read it? Yes. A heavy silence settled between them. There was so much to be said, so many apologies to be made, so many promises to be kept. But where to begin? How is she? Victor asked finally, his voice still weak. Sophia? Michael blinked, surprised by the question. She's fighting. The neural interface is working, but it will be a long road. Victor nodded slightly. You know what's most ironic? When I found out about August's plan, when I hacked the Tesla, part of me wanted to stop it, not for your safety, but for hers. An innocent child, being used as a pawn in a game of revenge, just like I was used. As a pawn in your game of corporate success. The words hit Michael like a punch to the gut. Son, No, Victor interrupted. Don't say you're sorry. Don't say you're going to change. Just tell me one thing. Why her? Why are you fighting so hard for this girl when you never fought for me? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Michael felt tears begin to form in his eyes, but he held them back. His son deserved more than tears now. Because every time I look at her, he began slowly, I see all the lives I helped destroy. Hers, her father's, yours. And for the first time in my life, I understand that I can't just throw money at the problem and expect it to be solved. I can't outsource the care to doctors and therapists. I need to be present. I need to be a father, Victor completed, a sad smile on his lips. Something you never were with me. But I can start now, said Michael, taking his son's bandaged hand in his. If you let me. If it's not too late. Victor closed his eyes, a solitary tear running down his face. You know what's scariest, Dad? Part of me still wants to believe in you, even after everything. Pathetic, isn't it? No, replied Michael, his voice choked. It's the bravest thing I've ever heard. At that moment, his phone vibrated. It was a message from Maria Luisa. The judge is going to the hospital now. We need you there. Victor must have noticed his expression change, because he let out a bitter laugh. Go, he said. She needs you more now. No, replied Michael, putting his phone away. Not this time. I'm not leaving this chair until we've talked about everything. About the camping trip, about the drugs, about August, about everything. No more emergency meetings more important than my son. And for the first time in years, he saw something different in Victor's eyes. It wasn't forgiveness. It was still too early for that. It wasn't love. That had never really disappeared, just transformed into hurt. It was something more basic, more fundamental. Hope. Outside the room, the nurse smiled discreetly as she noted something on the chart. Sometimes, she thought, people need to break down completely before they start to rebuild themselves. The hospital was strangely silent when Judge Ricardo Almeida arrived for his visit. Maria Luisa accompanied him, along with Dr. Paul, the court expert. August waited for them at the entrance of the pediatric ICU, his face marked by anxiety and sleepless nights. Michael's absence was noticeable, but no one made comments about it. "How is she today?" asked the judge, as they put on the protective gear needed to enter the pediatric ICU. "Better," replied August, his voice betraying a mixture of pride and concern. "The neural interface is working perfectly now. She even smiled yesterday." The group entered the room where Sophia was. The baby was awake, her curious eyes following the movements of the visitors. The neural interface created a soft glow under her delicate skin, like an almost imperceptible web of light. "Impressive," murmured Dr. Paul, examining the monitors. "The integration between the neural tissue and the technology is almost perfect. I've never seen anything like it in someone so young." The judge, however, was not looking at the monitors. His eyes were fixed on Sophia, observing how she reacted to August's presence. It was subtle, but undeniable. The baby calmed down visibly when her father approached, even if he couldn't touch her directly due to medical restrictions. "Dr. Martinez," called the judge, "in your professional opinion, what is the long-term prognosis?" The doctor, who had silently entered the room, thought for a moment before answering. "With the neural interface working as it is, many of the most serious neurological sequelae can be minimized, but she will still need years of therapy, constant monitoring, possible adjustment surgeries as she grows." "And the costs?" interrupted Dr. Paul. "How much would a middle-class family need to spend monthly to maintain this treatment?" The number that the doctor mentioned made August pale. It was more than he earned in a year, even before he lost everything. "And without the full treatment," insisted the expert, "what would be the consequences?" "Significant developmental delays," replied Dr. Martinez. "Possible partial paralysis, difficulties in speech and motor coordination, increased risk of seizures." "Enough!" August's voice came out louder than he intended, startling Sophia. "Please, I understand." The baby began to cry, a sharp sound that made the monitors beep in alarm. Instinctively, August took a step in her direction, but was restrained by the nurse. "You still can't touch her, Mr. Mendez. The risk of infection." It was at that moment that Sophia did something extraordinary. Amidst the crying, she extended her little hand towards her father, her fingers opening and closing as if trying to reach him. The gesture, seemingly simple, made Dr. Martinez's eyes widen. "That's remarkable," he said, quickly consulting the data on the monitor. "The fine motor coordination needed for this movement, the neural interface, is allowing connections that should be completely compromised." The judge watched the scene with interest. "Does she do this often? This type of intentional movement?" "No," replied the nurse. "In fact, this is the first time I've seen her try to reach someone like that." August had taken a few steps back, silent tears running down his marked face. Maria Luisa placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, offering silent support. "Where is Mr. Brauman?" asked the judge finally, turning to the social worker. "With his son," she replied softly. "There was a situation at the rehab clinic." The judge nodded, as if that information confirmed something he already suspected. And yet, Even with his own son in crisis, he kept the entire treatment structure working here. The medical team, the equipment, everything. It's not just that, interrupted Dr. Martinez. He has personally monitored all the data from the neural interface, making adjustments to the program, suggesting modifications. Even from a distance, he is completely involved in Sophia's recovery. The judge approached the crib, observing the baby, who had now calmed down, but kept her eyes fixed on August. "You know," he began, his voice taking on a more personal tone, "in 20 years on the bench, I've learned that sometimes the worst situations bring out the best in people. And sometimes what seems like an impossible solution is precisely what everyone needs." He turned to August. "Mr. Mendez, if I grant joint custody with Mr. Brauman as the financial and medical responsible party, but guaranteeing your right, as a father, to actively participate in your daughter's life, would you be willing to work together with him, even after everything?" August was silent for a long moment, his gaze alternating between Sophia and the judge. I just want what's best for her," he said finally, "even if it means swallowing my pride and working with the man who is also trying to fix his mistakes," completed Maria Luisa gently. At that moment, Sophia made a small sound, something between a sigh and a gurgle. It was almost as if she was trying to participate in the conversation that would decide her future. "Remarkable," murmured Dr. Paul, making notes on his clipboard. "Her responsiveness to the social environment, even after the neurological trauma." "It's not just responsiveness," interrupted Dr. Martinez, his voice betraying professional excitement. "Look at the patterns of the neural interface when she interacts like that. It's almost as if the device is learning from her, adapting not only to physical needs but also to emotional ones." The judge observed the data on the monitors with renewed interest. "So what we have here is more than just a custody case. It's a child who, literally, is creating new paths to communicate and develop. And for that, she needs all possible support, both emotional and technical." He turned to Maria Luisa. "Prepare the documents for joint custody with specific clauses about medical and financial responsibilities. I also want a detailed program of visits and psychological support for everyone involved." "Everyone?" asked August, confused. "Yes, everyone. You, Mr. Brauman, his son, and especially Sophia. This situation is too complex to simply sign some papers and expect everything to magically resolve itself." As if to emphasize the point, Sophia chose that moment to try again to reach August, her little fingers moving in the air with a determination surprising for someone so small. "Doctor," called the judge, turning to Dr. Martinez, "how long until the father can actually touch her?" "If the infection rates continue to be as low as they are, maybe in a week, but it will have to be gradual, with all due care." "Well," the judge began to remove his protective gear. "That gives us time to organize everything. I want the documents ready before the first physical contact happens, and I want Mr. Brauman present when we sign. After all," he looked meaningfully, "at August, you two need to learn to be a very peculiar family." As the group prepared to leave, Sophia began to cry again. But this time it was different. It wasn't a cry of pain or discomfort, but something more basic, more primordial. It was the cry of a child calling for her father. August stopped at the door, his hand touching the glass that separated him from his daughter. "Soon, little one," he whispered. "Soon I'll be able to hug you for real." Outside the pediatric ICU, the judge made a last note in his notebook before putting it away. "You know," he said to Maria Luisa, "sometimes our job is to find the perfect solution, but most of the time, it's finding the best way to make an imperfect situation work." Maria Luisa nodded, watching August, who was still standing at the door, looking at his daughter. "And do you think this will work?" "Honestly, I don't know. But that child is literally rebuilding her own brain to survive. The least we can do is give her all the possible tools for that, including 2 families willing to overcome their differences for her. The week that followed the judge's visit passed like a blur of intense emotions and significant changes. Michael divided his time between the rehab clinic, where Victor was slowly starting to respond to treatment, and the hospital, coordinating remotely the adjustments to Sophia's neural interface. The nights were spent in teleconferences with his research team, refining protocols and analyzing data. August, in turn, practically moved into the hospital. The nurses had arranged a recliner for him, positioned so that Sophia could see him whenever she was awake. Gradually, a silent routine was established between him and the medical team, a nod here, a whispered information there, as if everyone understood the importance of those moments of connection between father and daughter, even if still separated by the glass of the pediatric ICU. It was on one of those nights that something unexpected happened. Michael had arrived later than usual after a particularly difficult session with Victor. He found August dozing in the recliner, a children's book open in his lap. Apparently, he had spent the last hour reading stories to Sophia, even though she was still too young to understand. "The neural response rates increase when he reads to her," explained Dr. Laura in a low voice, showing the charts on the tablet. "It's as if her brain recognizes his voice. Even through the glass, the interface is recording activity patterns that we would normally only see in much older babies." Michael studied the data with professional interest, but his attention was captured by a movement in the crib. Sophia was awake, her little eyes fixed on him with that disturbing intensity that she sometimes demonstrated. For a moment, it was as if she was studying him, assessing him. "Does she do this often?" he asked the doctor. "This type of focus?" "Increasingly," replied Dr. Laura. "In fact, we were waiting for you to arrive to discuss something interesting. The neural interface is showing activity patterns that we didn't foresee in the original project." She pulled up another set of data on the tablet. "Look here. When she interacts with people, especially with her father, with you, or with the regular team, there's a kind of synchronization, as if the interface is not only correcting the neurological damage, but also learning to optimize social and emotional connections." "That's extraordinary," murmured Michael, his mind already racing with the implications. "We could be witnessing a completely new form of assisted neuroplasticity." "Exactly." The doctor's excitement was palpable. "And there's more. Since we started, allowing more social interaction, even if through the glass, her recovery indicators have improved significantly. It's like she's using the interface to build her own support network," completed a sleepy voice. August had woken up and now watched them with an expression difficult to read. Dr. Laura nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, and that leads us to a suggestion. We believe it's time to start the transition to direct physical contact. The risks of infection have decreased considerably, and the potential benefits—" "No." The word came out of August's mouth like a gunshot. Both Michael and the doctor turned to him, surprised. "But Mr. Mendez," began Dr. Laura, "all the indicators show—" "I said no." August stood up, dropping the book. "I'm not risk her life again. I won't. I can't." His voice faltered, and Michael suddenly understood. "You're afraid," he said softly. "Not of hurting her, but of getting too close and then losing her." August stared at him, a mixture of anger and vulnerability in his eyes. "You don't understand. The last time I thought I could have my daughter back, you almost killed her," completed Michael, his voice still gentle, "in a desperate attempt to get revenge on me. But this isn't about me now, is it? It's about you and her." In the crib, Sophia began to stir, as if she felt the tension in the room. The monitors recorded a change in the neural patterns. "Look," called Dr. Laura, pointing to the data. "She's responding to your conversation. The interface is showing peaks of activity in areas related to empathy and emotional processing." "How can she—" began August, but he was interrupted by a sound that made everyone freeze. Sophia was trying to babble. They weren't just the random sounds typical of a baby her age. There was a pattern, a clear attempt at communication, and she was looking directly at August. Is this normal for her age?" asked Michael, although he already knew the answer. "No," replied Dr. Laura, her voice barely containing her excitement. "Not even close. The interface must be facilitating neural connections that would normally only develop months later. She is literally accelerating her own development to try to communicate." August took a step towards the crib, his hands trembling. "My daughter is forcing herself to grow faster because of me." "Because of all of us," corrected Michael. "She understands somehow that she needs to build bridges, not just neural, but emotional too." As if to confirm his words, Sophia extended her little hand towards the glass, her fingers opening and closing in the air. The gesture was so full of intention, so clearly directed, that it made August's eyes fill with tears. I don't know if I can," he whispered. "Of course you can." Michael's voice took on a firmer tone. "You know how I know? Because a few weeks ago, when I was about to give up on everything, when my own son tried to take his own life, it was you who told the judge that maybe we needed to work together for her." August closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. When he opened them again, there was a new determination in his gaze. What do we need to do?" he asked the doctor. Dr. Laura smiled. "We'll start slowly. First, you'll need to go through a complete decontamination process, then sterile gloves, mask, the whole protocol, and initially it will only be a brief touch, no more than a few minutes. And if something goes wrong, we'll be monitoring every second," she assured him. "The interface will give us real-time feedback on how she's responding. At the first sign of any negative change, we'll stop immediately." Sophia made another sound, more insistent now. Her little eyes went from August to Michael and back, as if trying to participate in the discussion about her own future. "When?" asked August finally. "We can start the preparations right now," replied Dr. Laura. "The first contact can happen tomorrow morning if you feel ready." Michael watched as the doctor led August out of the pediatric ICU, explaining in detail the procedures they would need to follow. He was left alone with Sophia, who now watched him with that peculiar intensity again. "You're much smarter than we imagined, aren't you?" he murmured, approaching the crib. "Using our own technology to teach us about connection, about family." Sophia blinked, and for a moment, Michael could have sworn he saw a small smile form on her lips. The neural interface glowed softly under her skin, like a constellation of microscopic stars. "Tomorrow," he said softly, "you're going to finally be able to hug your father. And maybe, just maybe, you'll help us all learn how to heal not only bodies, but also broken hearts." The morning arrived with a thin mist that covered the windows of the hospital, creating an almost unreal atmosphere. August had spent the entire night in a meticulous decontamination process, following each protocol with an almost obsessive dedication. His hands trembled slightly as the nurse helped him put on the sterile suit, each movement precisely calculated to avoid any contamination. "You need to calm down," she said gently, adjusting the mask on his face. "Sophia will feel your anxiety, and that can affect the interface readings." On the other side of the glass of the pediatric ICU, Michael watched the preparations while talking in a low voice with Dr. Laura. He had spent the early morning in the laboratory, refining the algorithms of the neural interface to capture every nuance of the first physical interaction between father and daughter. "Her activity patterns are different this morning," commented the doctor, showing the data on the tablet. "It's almost as if she knew something important was going to happen." In fact, Sophia was extraordinarily alert for that time of the morning. Her eyes followed every movement on the other side of the glass, and the neural interface under her skin pulsed with a more intense glow than normal. "I brought reinforcements," announced Maria Luisa, entering the observation room. To everyone's surprise, she wasn't alone. Victor was with her, in a wheelchair, still visibly weak, but determined to be present. "Son." Michael took a step towards him, worried. "You should be at the clinic." "No!" cut Victor, his voice hoarse but firm. "I need to see this. I need to understand." Before anyone could question further, the door of the pediatric ICU opened. August entered slowly, completely covered in the sterile suit. He looked smaller like that, more vulnerable, as if all the protective equipment made him seem even more fragile. "Remember," instructed Dr. Laura over the intercom, "start slowly. Just a gentle touch at first. We'll monitor every reaction." August nodded, unable to form words. He approached the crib as if he were in a trance, each step seemingly costing a monumental effort. Sophia watched him with that disturbing intensity that she sometimes demonstrated, her fingers moving in the air as if trying to reach him. "Oxygen levels are great," narrated the doctor, looking at the monitors. "Heart rate a little elevated, but within expectations. The interface is responding well." The first touch was almost imperceptible, just the tips of August's gloved fingers brushing the outstretched little hand of Sophia. The effect, however, was immediate. The baby made a sound that no one had heard before, something between a sigh and a gurgle of joy. "Oh my God," whispered Dr. Laura, looking at the data. "Look at this, the neural activity. It's as if all the damaged areas are finding new paths at the same time." In the observation room, Victor leaned forward in his wheelchair, his eyes fixed. "On the scene, that's how it should have been," he murmured, so low that only Michael next to him could hear. "That's how a father should look at a child." Inside the pediatric ICU, August had managed to hold Sophia's little hand completely now. Tears streamed down his face behind the protective mask, but he barely seemed to notice. All his attention was focused on the small miracle that was happening before him. "Hi, little one," his voice came out choked. "Daddy's here, Daddy's finally here." Sophia responded with another sound, more determined this time. Her fingers closed around August's finger with a strength surprising for someone so small. "The neural synchrony is extraordinary," commented Dr. Laura, barely containing her professional excitement. "It's as if the interface is amplifying the emotional connection, translating it into neural impulses that stimulate recovery." "It's not just the interface," said Michael softly. "It's her, Sophia, finding her own way back to life." Victor looked at his father, a complex expression on his pale face. "How do you do it?" he asked. "How can you care so much about her after everything?" Michael felt his heart clench. "Maybe," he replied slowly, "it's because she showed me that there's always a way back. Even when we think we've destroyed everything, even when the bridges seem completely burned, there's always a possibility of rebuilding." In the pediatric ICU, something extraordinary was happening. Sophia had managed to hold not just one, but two of August's fingers. Her eyes, normally so serious, shone with a joy that seemed to illuminate her entire little face. "The motor patterns are reorganizing," explained Dr. Laura, showing the graphs to Maria Luisa. "It's as if the simple physical contact is catalyzing the entire recovery process." "It's not just the physical contact," corrected the social worker, a small smile on her lips. It's love. Sometimes it's all we need to start healing. It was at that moment that Sophia did something that no one expected. With a visible effort, she managed to lift her head slightly, a movement that should be impossible considering the neurological damage she had suffered. Her eyes met August's, and she smiled. It wasn't just an automatic reflex, but a real, conscious smile full of recognition. Is this normal?" asked Victor, leaning even further forward in his chair. "No," replied Dr. Laura, her voice barely containing her astonishment. "This shouldn't be possible yet. The muscular control needed, the coordination." "She's rewriting the rules," completed Michael, watching the data on the monitor. "Using the interface in ways we didn't foresee, creating new patterns of connection." Inside the pediatric ICU, August seemed oblivious to all the medical and scientific commotion that his daughter was causing. For him, at that moment, there existed only that smile, that small miracle that made all the suffering, all the guilt, all the pain seem like a small price to pay. "You're so strong," he whispered, his voice choked. "So much stronger than all of us." As if responding, Sophia made another of those sounds that seemed almost like words. The neural interface glowed more intensely for a moment, creating complex patterns under her skin. "The neurotransmitter levels are rising," warned Dr. Laura. "Maybe we should—" "No," interrupted Michael, studying the data. "Let it be. She's not in danger. She's evolving." Victor watched everything with an increasingly thoughtful expression. "It's funny," he said finally, his voice low. "I spent so much time trying to get your attention, Dad, trying to make you see me. And this little one, she did it without even trying, simply by being who she is." Michael felt his son's words like a stab in the chest. He placed a hand on Victor's shoulder, feeling him tense under his touch. "You're right," he admitted. "I was so busy trying to fix the world that I didn't see what I was breaking right in front of me. But maybe it's not too late to learn." In the pediatric ICU, the time allowed for the first contact was coming to an end. August reluctantly began to let go of Sophia's hand, but she clung to it more tightly, not wanting to let him go. "It's okay, little one," he whispered. "Daddy will be back. I promise I'll be back." It took the gentle help of the nurse to finally separate the two. Sophia began to cry, but it wasn't her normal cry. There was something different, something deeper and more conscious in her lament. "Look at this," called Dr. Laura, pointing to the data. "The interface is recording patterns typical of emotional memory. She's not just reacting to the moment, she's creating lasting memories of this interaction." While August was being led out of the pediatric ICU, starting the process of removing the sterile suit, Sophia continued to cry. Her eyes followed her father until he disappeared from sight, her little fingers still moving in the air as if trying to reach him. "She'll be okay," assured the nurse, adjusting the monitors. This was intense for everyone. In the observation room, a reflective silence had settled. Each person present seemed lost in their own thoughts, processing what they had witnessed. "Dad," called Victor softly, I think I understand now why you're doing all this." Michael looked at his son, waiting. "It's not just about fixing mistakes, is it? It's about learning to be better, to be more human." Victor's words hung in the air, loaded with meaning. In the pediatric ICU, Sophia had finally calmed down, her eyes beginning to droop with the weariness of the intense emotional experience. The neural interface continued to glow softly under her skin, like a silent promise of more miracles to come. The weeks that followed the first contact between August and Sophia brought changes that no one could have foreseen. The baby's recovery accelerated in an extraordinary way, surprising even the most experienced doctors. The neural interface seemed to have found a perfect balance with her small body, creating new connections every day. It's as if she's running a neurological marathon, explained Dr. Laura during a meeting with the medical team. The development that would normally take months is happening in weeks, but it wasn't just Sophia who was evolving. A silent transformation was taking place in everyone around her. August, who could now spend hours with his daughter every day, was slowly beginning to recover something he had lost a long time ago: hope. His scars, both physical and emotional, seemed less prominent when he smiled at Sophia. Michael was also changing. Dividing his time between the hospital and the rehab clinic, he was beginning to understand the true meaning of paternal presence. With Victor, each day was a new lesson in patience and perseverance. The conversations, previously tense and loaded with accusations, were beginning to find new rhythms, new meanings. "You know what's hardest?" said Victor one afternoon during one of his physical therapy sessions at the clinic. "It's not the physical withdrawal. It's realizing how much time we lost, how many moments we wasted." Michael, who was helping him with the exercises, felt the weight of those words. "I know, son, but maybe we still have time to create new moments." It was during one of these conversations that they received the news. Sophia was ready to leave the pediatric ICU. Her vital signs were stable, the neural interface functioned perfectly, and she demonstrated impressive progress in her motor development. "But there's still the matter of joint custody," reminded Maria Luisa during the final meeting with the judge. "How are we going to operationalize this in practice?" Judge Ricardo Almeida removed his glasses, cleaning them methodically as he considered the situation. "The documents are ready. The question now is, are you really prepared for this?" The question hung in the air of the hospital meeting room. August and Michael looked at each other, a silent communication passing between them. In recent weeks, they had developed a kind of mutual understanding, built on the common ground of love for Sophia. "I have a suggestion," said Victor unexpectedly. He had insisted on participating in the meeting, even still using crutches. "Why don't we adapt? The guest house on the property? The one with a separate entrance. August could live there, close to Sophia, but maintaining his privacy." The proposal caught everyone by surprise. Michael looked at his son with a mixture of pride and amazement. It was the first time Victor had taken such an initiative, thinking about the well-being of others. That could work," considered Maria Luisa, "with the necessary modifications for the medical equipment that Sophia will still need." "I don't know," interrupted August, his voice betraying uncertainty. "Living in the house of the man who is trying to fix his mistakes," completed Victor. "Just like me, just like you." The silence that followed was broken by the familiar sound of the medical tablet. New data from Sophia's neural interface appeared on the screen, showing even more complex patterns of development. "Look at this," called Dr. Laura, who had just entered the room. "She's trying to form words, not just sounds, but real attempts at verbal communication." Everyone crowded around the tablet, watching the graphs that showed Sophia's brain activity. The areas related to speech were lit up, pulsing with an intensity that shouldn't be possible for a baby her age. "She's calling us," said Michael softly. "All of us, in her own way." As if to confirm his words, the image from the pediatric ICU camera showed Sophia in her crib, completely awake and alert, her little eyes moving between the people who appeared on the display installed in her room. A technology that Michael had developed especially to maintain visual connection even when they couldn't be physically present. "Da, or damn," the sound came through the speaker, making everyone freeze. It wasn't just a random babble. There was clear intention in that sound. August brought his hand to his mouth, silent tears streaming down his marked face. Victor, leaning on his crutches, took an involuntary step towards the screen. Michael felt something tighten in his chest. It wasn't just pride in the success of the neural interface, it was something deeper, more human. "I think," said the judge, gently breaking the moment, that we've just received our answer. This child is creating her own family in her own way. Who are we to impose conventional limits on something so extraordinary? Maria Luisa was already making notes on her clipboard. I'll arrange the necessary documentation for the adaptation of the guest house. We'll need technical reports for the structural modifications, safety assessments. I'll take care of that, offered Victor, surprising everyone again. I have free time now and, well, I need to occupy my mind with something constructive. Michael felt his heart swell with pride. His son, who just a few weeks ago was on the verge of suicide, was now taking initiatives, seeking ways to help others. Are you sure? Asked August, studying Victor with a complex expression. After everything? Interrupted Victor. That's exactly why I need to do this. Because I understand now that sometimes we need to build something new on the ruins of what we destroyed. On the screen, Sophia made another sound, as if approving the decision. The neural interface glowed more intensely under her skin, creating patterns that resembled a dance of light. The activity levels are extraordinary, commented Dr. Laura, still studying the data. It's almost as if she's celebrating. She is, said Maria Luisa with a small smile. In her own way, she's telling us that she approves of this peculiar arrangement that we're creating. The judge began to gather his papers, an air of satisfaction on his face. Then it's decided we'll formalize the joint custody with this living arrangement. But, he looked seriously at everyone in the room, I want bi-weekly reports, not just on Sophia's physical development, but on how this family dynamic is working. And if it doesn't work? The worry in August's voice was palpable. It will work, said Michael with a certainty that surprised even himself. Because we're not doing this for us, we're doing it for her, and she has already proven to be stronger and wiser than all of us combined. As if to emphasize his words, Sophia let out a small laugh, a sound so pure, so full of joy, that it made all the adults in the room stop and smile involuntarily. Da! Da! She repeated, clearer this time. And then, to the complete amazement of everyone, da, da, da. 3 syllables, 3 calls, as if she was naming each of them, August, Michael, Victor, in her own way, creating her own definition of family. A year had passed since that meeting at the hospital. The guest house of the Brauman mansion had been transformed into a welcoming space, perfectly adapted to Sophia's needs. Victor personally supervised every detail of the renovation, from the installation of medical equipment to the decoration of the baby's room, discovering in the process an unexpected talent for architecture and design. The neural interface had evolved along with Sophia, adapting to her growth in ways that surprised even its creators. The soft glow under her skin now seemed part of her, like a particular constellation that mapped her journey of recovery. Her development patterns are extraordinary, explained Dr. Laura during one of the follow-up consultations. She has not only overcome most of the predicted sequelae, but is showing cognitive abilities far above average for her age. In fact, at 1.5 years old, Sophia already spoke clear words, demonstrated impressive motor coordination, and, more surprisingly, seemed to have an almost supernatural ability to understand the emotions of the people around her. It's as if the neural interface had amplified not only her physical connections, but also her emotional intelligence, commented Michael, watching how his daughter interacted with everyone around her. The family dynamic that was established was unique, but it worked in a way that no one could have predicted. August, living in the guest house, was present in all the important moments of Sophia's life. His relationship with Michael, although still marked by moments of tension, had evolved into a mutual respect based on the shared love for the little one. Victor, who now completed 1 year of sobriety, had become a constant and positive presence. In Sophia's life, It was common to find him sitting on the rug in her room, building towers of blocks that she knocked down with contagious laughter. "You know what's most incredible?" he said one afternoon, watching Sophia play. "She never looked at me as the man who almost killed her. From the first moment, she saw me only as part of the family." The word family had taken on a new meaning for all of them. It was no longer defined by blood ties or traditional roles, but by daily choices of love and commitment. It was on a Sunday morning that something extraordinary happened. The family was gathered in the garden, enjoying the soft autumn sun. Sophia, who had just started to take her first steps without support, walked carefully between August and Michael, who were sitting in nearby chairs. "Daddy!" she called clearly, extending her arms to August, then turning to Michael with a radiant smile. "Grandpa!" The silence that followed was broken by Victor's emotional laughter, who watched the scene closely. "Well, Dad, I think you just got promoted." Michael felt tears in his eyes, but they weren't of sadness. Sophia had found, in her innocent wisdom, the perfect definition for their roles. It wasn't a question of replacement or competition. It was about expansion, about creating space for more love. "The interface is recording interesting patterns," commented Dr. Laura, who had become a regular presence at family weekends. "Every time she makes these emotional connections, there's a kind of neural harmony, as if her brain is celebrating each new bond formed." August, who before would have felt threatened by any mention of the technology that had saved his daughter, now listened with genuine interest. "So she really understands all these complex relationships that we created?" "She understands in her own way," replied the doctor. The interface not only corrected the neurological damage, it allowed Sophia to develop a unique way to perceive and process emotional connections. At that moment, as if to demonstrate the point, Sophia staggered over to Victor, who was sitting on the grass. "Uncle," she said clearly, handing him a toy. "Build." Victor took the toy carefully, his hands, once trembling from withdrawal, now firm from time and treatment, gentle in helping her assemble a small tower. "Sure, Princess. Let's build something amazing." The metaphor didn't go unnoticed by anyone. That's exactly what they all had done in the last year, built something amazing from the rubble of their previous lives. Maria Luisa, who continued to make regular follow-up visits, smiled as she watched the scene. "You know," she said to no one in particular, "when we suggested joint custody, I never imagined it would result in something like this." "Something like what?" asked Michael, although he already knew the answer. "A real family," she replied simply. "Not perfect, not conventional, but real. With all its complexities and imperfections, but mostly with all its love." Sophia, who seemed to have a special talent for choosing significant moments, chose that instant to do something surprising. She stood up from where she was playing with Victor and, with steps still insecure but determined, walked to the center of the circle formed by all of them. "Family," she said clearly, opening her arms as if she wanted to hug everyone at the same time. The neural interface glowed more intensely under her skin, creating patterns that seemed to dance with her joy. August was the first to move, kneeling down to get to her level. Michael followed his example, and soon Victor also joined them. For a moment, they all stood there, connected by the radiant presence of that little child who had somehow fixed not only her own neurological damage, but also the broken hearts of everyone around her. "That's it," said Michael softly, observing his unconventional family. "That's how we heal the past. Not by erasing the scars, but by learning to create beauty from them." Sophia let out a laugh, the purest and truest sound that any of them had ever heard. The neural interface pulsed one last time, as if sealing that moment in everyone's memory. There, in the garden, bathed in the soft autumn light, Between children's laughter and silent tears of adults, a simple truth became clear. Sometimes, the strongest families are not those that are born perfect, but those that are forged through pain, forgiveness, and the daily choice to love, despite everything and because of everything. And Sophia, with her innocent wisdom and her revolutionary technology, had shown them all that there is always a path to healing, even if that path is different from everything we have ever known before.